Hello and welcome back. It is Monday. I am Mr. Sosatris, and this week I wanted to talk about an author whose books I will pre-order without even knowing anything about what's in the book. So we call these auto-buy authors, and these are authors who you just trust implicitly. You know that what they're going to produce is just incredible, and you don't even have to be persuaded to check out one of their books. You just know it's going to be amazing right off the bat. And so today I wanted to talk about the author Silvia Moreno-Garcia, who is an absolute powerhouse of an author. She puts out so many books. Her first book was published, I think, in 2015, and before that she's contributed short stories to anthologies, she's edited anthologies, just a really busy author. And since then, she's published tons of books and has re-released a few of them, but I just love her work. And what's so great about her books is that they're all different genres. She does different things in every one, so there's never kind of one specific rut that she kind of gets into. It's always she's experimenting, trying new things. She's always exploring different worlds and putting her own spin on a lot of different genres. So I wanted to go through the list of her novels, which I've read all of them, and just convince you that you need to give this author a try. And there's something for everybody in this list for sure. Now, the first book on the list is Signal to Noise. This was her first book, and it's actually the last book of hers that I read. I've been kind of going through them all backwards. And this one is really, really interesting. It's marketed sometimes as YA, but it doesn't really read like YA. It's two timelines, and one is in the 80s when the characters are teenagers, and there's another one in 2009 when the characters are adults and they're dealing with the fallout of what happened when they were kids. It's got kind of a Stranger Things vibe. The kids sort of discover that listening to certain music can cause them to influence the world in a magical way. It's almost magic realism. I think it's also called urban fantasy, but the fantasy element is really kind of seamlessly woven into kind of the woes and chaos of being a teenager. And so the book is really about kind of their relationships and their friendships and the things going on with their families, and then we move forward and we see kind of in the future, and it jumps back and forth, but we see in the future kind of the fallout from what happened when they were kids, the kind of emotional maturity that comes with growing up and reevaluating things. And it was just, I really, really enjoyed it. This author really gets character, and she knows how to create great arcs and have characters who maybe aren't heroic or perfect and who are really flawed, but you still like them, even though they make mistakes, because they're kids, they're teenagers, they're dumb, and they learn from their mistakes, they grow up, and we get to see them kind of as adults dealing with the fallout of what happened earlier. It's a great book. I really, really loved it. If you like that kind of urban, rooted in reality kind of drama with magical elements thrown in. Next up is Certain Dark Things. This is a vampire novel. It's also heavily influenced by noir. I think the author calls this a vampire noir. This is one of the slickest and most stylish vampire books I've ever read. It is just great. It has so much lore, and it's not a really long book. It's a really quick kind of crime noir with dealing with the world of vampires, but there's really complex lore that is so interesting. The different kinds of vampires, where they come from, and it's all sort of rooted in Mexican mythology, and it's really, really cool. Probably one of my favorite vampire books ever. Certain Dark Things. It's great. Her next book is called The Beautiful Ones, and this was very different from the previous one. This one is sort of it's not a Regency romance, but it's sort of a high society historical romance, but it's got some magical elements. Now, unlike Signal to Noise, the magic isn't sort of a big part of the story. It's more like this is really you know, a high society second chance romance with, you know, big opulent gowns and society drama and gossip and everything. And there are little bits, there's kind of, in this world, there's little bits of magic that are kind of in the background, and they're sort of important to certain characters, but it's still very much rooted in this sort of, you know, opulent kind of drama. The romance is great. I love the kind of complex messiness of it all. It feels almost like a telenovela, the high drama and like the emotions and everything, and it's a lot of fun. I really liked that one. Next up is one that was probably her first like big hit, and that was Gods of Jade and Shadow. It's another urban fantasy, I guess, but it's set in the 20s, and it follows a character, a young woman who accidentally summons like a Mayan god, and she's kind of goes on a quest with him to kind of reassemble all of his strength. And there's magical elements nestled in with the reality, and it's very clued into kind of the 1920s aesthetic. It's very stylized, really beautiful. The emotional arc is really great, and I love seeing, like, you know, magical beasts and beings all kind of having to live amongst like normal human beings and pretend to be human, and it's wonderful. Again, it's a short book, it's a quick read, but it's just like a feast for the imagination, and it's a lot of fun. After that, she went into crime fiction, and the next one is called Untamed Shore, and this one, it's kind of a thriller. It's a crime thriller. You've got a character who's kind of living in an area that's kind of a big tourist destination in like Baja California, and she gets caught up in this sort of sleazy underworld plot, and she has to kind of find her way out of it and keep herself alive all through it. It's thrilling, it's fast-paced. That was actually the first one of hers that I read, was this one, and it hooks you immediately. It's not something that I originally thought that I would be super into, but it was really highly recommended, and it just grabs you immediately. It's very rooted in kind of the place and the gritty details, and it just feels like kind of a gritty 80s crime thriller, and it's wonderful. After that is one that I think everyone's heard of by now, and that is Mexican Gothic. This is the first one that I was able to find in physical format. All the other ones, you can get all of them, but all the other ones I've been collecting in ebook. I usually pre-order it as an ebook and it goes to my e-reader, but I do want to start collecting them in hardcover if possible because I love them so much. But Mexican Gothic is great. This is, of course, it's a Gothic horror. It's very drenched in kind of that Jane Eyre, Rebecca kind of vibe. There's also some kind of cosmic horror elements as well, which really add a lot to it. But again, it's rooted in sort of a character and her family, and you know, a member of her family gets caught up in this kind of weird aristocratic white family who lives in this huge mansion above kind of like a town in Mexico, and it's just great. It's set in the 1950s, and so she's kind of this socialite, and you know, very clean and crisp and well-spoken and educated, and she has to come into this sort of creepy mansion filled with dark secrets and strange things, and it's great. The vibes are perfect, and it's a little slower paced, but it works because that's kind of what Gothic fiction does. It's kind of the slow burn and the slow realization that like something is wrong in this house, and it's great. I loved this one so much. After that, she did a book called Velvet Was the Night, and this is another kind of crime thriller. It's a little more modern. The main character discovers that a friend of hers gets caught up in this kind of weird, twisty crime thing, and she has to sort of investigate it and stay alive in the process. That one's a really big one. It's very twisty-turny, but really satisfying, and again, she just gets characters. I love her main characters so much because all of them are just sort of like normal, everyday people who just get thrown into kind of bizarre situations, and they just have to kind of figure out what's going on. But they're always so relatable. All of her characters are just rooted and grounded in reality. Everyone is flawed and has insecurities, but also has strengths and things that they're really good at. And it's really satisfying to see these people kind of interacting with these wacky situations. Next up, we've got kind of a weird blend of genres. The next book after that was called The Daughter of Dr. Moreau. And it's not really a sequel to H.G. Wells' The Island of Dr. Moreau. It's more like a retelling and a reimagining. So H.G. Wells' book, The Island of Dr. Moreau, is sort of a Frankenstein-esque story where you've got this scientist who performs strange experiments on animals on this secluded island where he wants to sort of turn animals into people. And so he creates these sort of human-animal hybrids, and it's all about kind of the brutality of human nature and everything. When Silvia Moreno-Garcia gets a hold of this story, she adds a whole lot more to it. It becomes more about coming of age and the dangers that young women face. It's set in Mexico in like the 1800s, and it's a lot more about kind of the tenuousness of balance and just how easy it is for kind of things to go wrong, because you've got kind of her father is the one who's creating the animal-human hybrids, and she is kind of involved in a relationship she doesn't really understand. She's a little too young to realize she's being taken advantage of, and there's a lot of other stuff going on, and it's all kind of set against this backdrop of these experiments, and it's creepy and it's lush and beautiful, and just the way she describes everything is so great. You just feel kind of the moisture dripping off the fruit on the trees in the jungle kind of thing. So much great detail, and that was a really, really good one, and I definitely want to reread it, and I want to get that one in hardcover because the cover is so beautiful. So I'm gonna eventually collect all of them in hardcover, or, you know, physical form if I can, but that's definitely one that I want to get sooner. Now we come to her most recently published book, and that is Silver Nitrate. And this one is gothic horror mixed with noir elements. It takes place in like a film studio, and the main character sort of discovers that there's sort of this occult secret buried in this certain film. It's like the film itself has elements in the film that kind of give it magical abilities, and there's this kind of ancient curse. It has ties to like Nazi occultism, and the main character and her friend, who is one of my favorite characters she's ever created, they have to sort of solve this mystery, and the whole time they have kind of an almost relationship, but it's like he seems like he isn't taking anything seriously, and she's kind of the practical one who wants to sort of, you know, figure all this out. But it's steeped in film lore. This one is kind of a love letter to film in the way that Signal to Noise is kind of a love letter to music and like the great albums of like the 60s, 70s, and 80s. This one is very much a love letter to sort of film history and film techniques and technology, all wrapped up in this kind of weird occultist threat that they have to kind of fight. And this one is a lot of fun. It's got kind of a pulpy horror feel to it, but it's not, and I'm saying this as a good thing, it's not like brutal, unrelenting horror. Like if you're not really, like if you're a bit of a scaredy cat and you're not huge into like really heavy, ridiculous kind of dark, bleak horror, this is a really good one because it's got the horror elements, but it's also got some kind of humor to it, and it's more about a mystery. It kind of feels more like urban fantasy, more so than horror, but there are lots of horror elements, but it's still a lot of fun. And then next up we have her upcoming book, which hasn't been released yet, but which I am so excited, I already have it pre-ordered, and it's called The Seventh Veil of Salome. And this one, from what I've heard, is going back to sort of the crime drama roots. It's not fantasy or horror or anything. It's a thriller, and it feels kind of like dramatic and noir influenced. So I'm really excited for that book when it comes out, and I don't know when that one is. I think that one comes out in August, maybe? I'll have to look into that. But anyways, everything that she's written has been great. She also has a bunch of novellas, which I haven't yet read. There's one that's like high fantasy called The Return of the Sorceress that I definitely want to check out. There's a bunch of others in that list that are all different genres, but I haven't checked them out yet. But I've read all of her novels, and I love all of them. She's such a talented writer, and she really understands character and character arcs and people that you can relate to. Even characters in like Mexican Gothic, who she's more of a socialite, and she's very poised and, you know, elegant and very well put together and educated and can kind of navigate society very effortlessly. Even she feels relatable, because once she's thrown into this kind of Gothic mansion and this crazy kind of environment, she's off balance and she has to rely on sort of figuring things out, but she's not in control of the situation. And so again, that's how you're able to kind of relate to her. But all of her characters are great. She's one of my favorite authors. You should definitely check her out and read her books, because there's something in it for everyone, and they're all a lot of fun. And they're not like massive chunky tomes that take you forever. These are books that you can enjoy over a weekend, and I cannot wait to read her future books, because I know they're going to be great. So she has the potential to be like Stephen King and just pump out like hundreds and hundreds of books over years. But I hope she doesn't burn herself out, because we love her and we want her to do amazing things. So with that said, I will let you go. I'll see you next week. And in the meantime, happy reading. Bye.